Hello, everyone. So I'm Morgana Angeli, and I'm a senior at the International School of Brussels and one of the founders of Reset Revolution. So today we're going to be talking about the issue with being colorblind to race and how oftentimes in international schools they use this anecdote of everyone being the same and cultures not really mattering because everyone is equal. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So Erica is going to be joining me at her school at a tournament for sports, and she's Italian, African American, and yeah. So hi, Erica. Do you want
Hi.
to tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I currently go to Northeastern and I graduated from the International School of Zug and Luzern 2 years ago. Oh my gosh, that's crazy. Um, and I'm a criminal justice major with a minor in psychology. And sorry, the question cut off because it was said as I was joining, so what was the rest of the question?
It was just like, do you want to introduce yourself just quickly
Oh,
for people watching?
yeah, but
Okay,
that's about it.
so yeah. So you grew up in international schools, right? Since you graduated from Zug Luzern.
Mhm.
And how was your experience with the international school system as a whole?
So I think the time that I was in an international school was like a crucial growing time for me. I was there for like 7 years, so I joined in seventh grade and then ended up graduating there. Um, my experience was pretty good. Like obviously with the topic of like the whitewashed education system, like that's a different part of it, but overall I would say that my experience was good. Like great friends. I think it was a great education in general in terms of like what I studied. Um, yeah, I think that's it.
So to expand on what you mentioned with the whitewashed education, what do you mean with that? Um, do you want to
Um,
elaborate?
yeah, I noticed that at my school, so I remember some of the humanities teachers talking about how like they didn't want to like study any or teach anything that happened in the US, which is like I kind of get it, but I also kind of don't because their idea is that like, oh, the US, they think they're the center of everything, so they don't want to teach that, right? Um, but in the process, they were also kind of taking out a huge part of like history in general. And like it's not only like, for example, slavery. That was not a very big topic at all. I think it was taught in the civil rights movement was taught in the IBHL history class. And there was one US history AP class that happened every 2 years. So it was not very common to talk about it. And we also kind of dismissed the idea that slavery didn't only happen in the US. Like it was a global thing. And it was not, at least through my experience there, it was very, like, it wasn't touched upon really very much. So I don't know. I feel like the talking about like different cultures and like racism in general and discrimination was not a huge topic of conversation in any classes, which is quite disappointing. But
And what do you think the effects that this like exclusion of teaching about these issues had on the student body or had on people that graduated from there or still studying there?
yeah, so already the a number of students of color is very small, let alone black kids. Like it was me and maybe two other kids while I was there that were black. And then in terms of people in color in general, it's a very small community with a very, very small or maybe little to no support system at the school. So not actually talking about those issues is quite problematic. I don't know, it's like a huge lack of representation. And like we don't only have to talk about the negative stuff of like POC culture, but like you can also talk about the positive, and neither of that was touched on. And so it was already the lack of support system and the lack of education on it was not a good combination.
Yeah, and at Northeastern, how has that changed? Do you think that maybe studying in the US or maybe studying at a higher level, do you think that changes things, or how's your experience?
Yeah, definitely. I think that with Northeastern, like it's a huge school, and I feel like the US, like maybe people think that we talk too much about race. I don't think there's such a thing to talk too much about it, but yeah, I've noticed that there's obviously in college there's a bigger variety of classes that you can take, but like even though it needs work, there's an Africana Studies department in at Northeastern, and I've been able to take classes on like African American history and like Black popular culture, all of that stuff. And there's also like anthropology classes that I learned about Native American culture as well. So yeah, there's just like a much wider range of classes that you can take, and like a bigger range of things that you can learn about rather than just like history in Europe and like history in Switzerland, history in like Italy, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's necessary for students, especially since for IB, like I know nothing about history just because I don't take history. And I think that's crazy because we should all know some history. Yeah, and to touch upon the main theme, so being colorblind to race, do you think that this was included in your international school where people were like, oh yeah, it's international, like everyone's included, we're all the same? And what can you have done?
So recently ISL got a new principal, and I'm not talking badly about anyone, I'm just like bringing it up because he had this thing where every year at the like first day back assembly, he would preach about inclusion and like welcoming people, and like if you're Muslim, we welcome you. If you're Christian, we welcome you. If you're Black, white, Asian, anything, we welcome you. So he preached this so much and made sure to make everyone feel accepted and welcome. But then when we actually get to learning, that just kind of disappears. So it seemed like it was just kind of put on for show, rather than actually like caring about the small student body that was not white. And so I think the whole like not seeing color, I don't think it's like a conscious decision. Maybe it is, but like I didn't really get a very conscious, like, I don't know how to explain that, but I definitely think subconsciously that's what like the school kind of ran with, because someone commented earlier saying that they think a lot of teachers are afraid to speak on subjects that make them uncomfortable. So with that in mind, like with people not being comfortable with talking about the subject and the idea that, oh, we're not going to see color, we're just going to talk about the things that need to be talked about, it's actually much more harmful than people think. Like they think it's like a PC thing to say and like it'll make people feel better, but in reality, like if you don't see the color of your students, you're not really seeing them. So that's how I feel.
I think that's a very good like explanation, and I think a lot of people watching maybe can understand what you're saying, and what do you think that how this experience, this having this fake international or whitewash middle school experience, how it shaped you personally? Like, did you see you changing your own personal attitudes to conform to this other standard?
Yeah, that's a good question. I like obviously all of my friends at ISL were like predominantly white. Like most of my friends were white. So I don't think I had to suppress any part of myself. Like I think that my friends were like very accepting of they're great people. Like obviously I wouldn't be friends with them otherwise. But yeah, I don't think I had to suppress anything. But I also think that that's part of the lack of education that I got on like I've only started like accepting is the wrong word. I've always accepted that I was Black, and I love the fact that I'm Black. I wouldn't change it for anything, but I only started learning about it once I left. So I think that international schools are like a huge bubble, and once you leave, you start to really see the real world and like understanding what that's like and understanding like racism every day. Even though I did experience racism while I was there and like in Switzerland in general, like you really see it. And the lack of education on that is what really contributed to that culture shock of like moving back to the US and like actually seeing what that's like. So I think in terms of shaping me, I wouldn't necessarily change my experience socially at all. But in terms of education, I definitely would. And I'm happy with where I am now, because now that I've moved, I've like grown into myself, I guess. And like I have more Black friends than I've ever had, which is fantastic. And not that I couldn't relate to my friends when I was in high school, but like I definitely can relate to these friends as well, which is great because I'm half and half, so like kind of balances it out a little bit. But yeah, overall the social experience was good, and I feel like it shaped me well in the sense that I'm more politically and socially aware now, because I guess because I didn't have that education in high school, like I've been going out of my way to learn more about it now. So yeah, it's kind of like bittersweet love-hate type thing.
A lot of people have the same experience where they love their high school years, and then when they leave for college, they're like, oh wow, this is a whole new world, you know, like,
yeah,
I loved it there, but this is like, if I could take my social life and bring it here, this would be amazing.
mm-hmm. Exactly. I definitely feel that very, very hard, I guess. I don't know. It's like, I know that Northeastern is still a predominantly white institution, but because it's so big and like there's so many students, like having, like, for example, we have a Northeastern Black Student Association, and like there are other ones for other races and different cultures as well. But like that is like the support system that I missed in high school. And obviously it would have been a very small like community to support, but like it would have helped for it to have been there. So I don't know, like the representation, even though like it's still predominantly white, it feels a lot more comfortable and a lot more like homey, I guess, in university. So
yeah. I understand that. That makes sense. What do you think people could do, except for changing the curriculum, which obviously needs to happen? What else do you think could be done in high schools or elementary schools or middle schools to do something?
I think like overall, I know it's hard to ask this of everyone, but like going out of your own way to like try and educate yourself on different cultures, because people can say that they're open-minded and that they have a growth mindset, but like they won't like do their own part. Like you shouldn't have to be told to like learn about this stuff. Like you should want to do it for yourself and for like your own information. So I think that besides the education system needing to improve in themselves, like people should want to, especially with our current political climate, they should want to understand more, and like for the sake of like the people around them. Like I know that my friends from high school have been great and like are trying to be extremely supportive, even though they don't understand, like they see what I'm going through and they understand what Black people go through and like minorities go through, but they will never like fully know. But the fact that they're trying is already enough, you know? So I feel like it has to come from within and not just the education system.
Yeah. And I think it's something that I've seen like on the rise kind of, since the Black Lives Matter movements earlier this year. I think people have started to try to understand more and like learn about the problems that we're faced with in society. One of the questions was, at ISB we have International Day, which is where you dress with your country and you like sell food. Did you guys have that at your school?
We did, but I noticed that so we had this thing at ISDL called PDW, which is Personal Development Week. And so that's when like we take a week and we travel somewhere with our class and do like service or learn about something. Or like when you're younger, obviously you do stuff that's more fun, but as you get older, you do more serious things. So for example, my senior year, I went to Tanzania with some of my class. It was really fun. I loved it. But I noticed that at International Day, obviously no one at my school is Tanzanian. So we had like people that weren't Tanzanian representing the culture. And it's like they're respecting it, which is good. But like obviously that's a little bit of a problem because we don't have the people to actually represent themselves, you know? So we did have International Day, and I do think it's a great idea because it does like show respect towards everyone. And it's an opportunity for you to show who you really are. But yeah, because there's such a lack of diversity, not in terms of nationality, but in terms of race and like ethnicity, it was kind of like, I don't know how to explain it. It was just like underwhelming, I guess.
Yeah, I understand that. Like, I feel that. I think ISB is very diverse in terms of nationality, But again, in terms of ethnicity, not really. Like, there's a lot of people who lived in a lot of countries,
Yeah,
but not a lot of people from those countries.
exactly.
Yeah. Another
Um,
question is, have you ever felt discriminated, or what are some instances where you felt, yeah,
yeah, that's a good question. I feel like, just to preface this, there's a big difference between racism in Europe and racism in the US. Like, I feel like because in Europe there's such a, like, I feel like in Europe it's more microaggressions. It's out of ignorance. Like, people don't know. This isn't for everyone. I'm just like generalizing a little bit, but there's a lot of ignorance and people don't really understand what they're saying is wrong, or like what they're doing is wrong. So I just want to say that. And then in the US, like, it's very hard not to see. So I guess that's more out of just like being cruel. Again, a very big generalization, but at my school, I think one of the like things that happened more often, I guess, was people not knowing not to say the N-word in songs around. Like, obviously everyone has their own opinion on it, but personally I don't like it, especially because I was one of the only kids there, so it was hard for me to just defend myself. So hearing people say the N-word in songs around me, or just saying it in general, a lot of people said it. I was very surprised, but like a lot of people in the grade below me were like very into saying it, not quite sure why, but that I think was like a microaggression. I had a white kid come up to me while we were in Tanzania, which is quite funny, but he said the N-word right next to me, and then like I told him, like, please don't say that, and he was like, it's just a word, like, you can't get worked up about it, like, how are you going to tell me not to say it, like, it's just a word. And I'm like, yeah, to you. Like, it's a racial slur, and like I had to explain it, but obviously he doesn't get it and still says it, but it is what it is. So that was a big thing. Another thing, like, I think the majority of the time that I was in international school, I didn't really face like extreme racism. Like, I was lucky because not everyone can say the same, but there was one instance in my senior year where we were doing a like senior, what is it called? Like, we did a senior roast, that's what it's called. And we could like send in submissions. I didn't, but my friends and I were joking around about like something. I'm not going to name it exactly because I don't want to bring anyone into it, but this girl got upset with me, and like I reassured her. I was like, it's okay, like I didn't send it, I'm so sorry for saying anything. And then she was like, oh yeah, you saying that about me is like me calling you, and then said a nigger, and like repeated it twice. And I was like, oh, what? So that was like a big altercation, and the way that the school handled it was like really poor. And they were like, oh, there's no proof of her actually saying it, so like you apologize for you saying this about her, and then like she apologizes to me, but like she apologized for calling me a black person, not the N-word. So yeah, the school didn't know how to deal with race at all. But that was, I think, the biggest thing that I probably experienced at my school. I'm trying to think of, I experienced things in my town for sure, but within my school community it was more so like microaggressions, people singing the N-word at parties and stuff like that.
And in your town, was it more? Like, was it worse? Like, did you feel marginalized?
Yeah, definitely getting looks all the time, like getting stared at when on public transport or just like in the town. I had one time where I was getting on the bus and like someone tripped me and like called me the N-word, and I was like, oh, okay. So that's not cool. With my brother as well, he had it once where like when he was trying to leave school from like practice or something, he wanted to take the bus, obviously. And wait, it's frozen. Okay, wait, I think we're good. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. He wanted to take the bus, and basically the bus driver didn't stop for him and just flipped him off and then kept driving. Like, that was, bus drivers do not, like, I don't know, they don't mess around when it comes to their own beliefs. I don't know. So yeah, those are like some examples of like what we have been through. I've been followed before as well. Yeah, that's just off the top of my head though.
That sounds horrible. I'm really sorry that
It's
happened.
okay.
And it shouldn't happen. And it's just horrible because, you know, it's all education. I think it starts with education, and then obviously there's those people who just choose to be ignorant and just do that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's them.
Yeah.
But I think definitely in Europe, it's a thing of education, and not only in international schools, but bringing that education to public schools and to communities. And yeah, with the teachers not being able to really deal with problems with race, that was a problem at our school a little bit. Where a friend of mine, he was telling me how his sister, she got bullied and was being called the N-word, and then she told the counselor, and they were like, oh, okay, the kid just has to apologize and then everything is fine. And so you're teaching kids that they just have to say sorry and they get away with anything.
And they continue with that behavior when they don't receive any type of backlash. Like the whole thing with the girl like calling me the N-word, it became a thing to the point where like we had a meeting with the principal, and like she was threatening to bring her parents in it, but it wasn't very much of a threat because she was the one who was in the wrong in this situation. And because she changed what she said and said, oh, I called you a black person, not a nigger, like there's no way that I can mistake that. It's two completely different things. Like, why would I get upset about you calling me something that I am, you know? So, yeah, and there's no way, like, even with the way that the words sound, like, there's no way that I could have mistaken it. And because of that, and because she didn't actually admit what she had done, the school was like, oh, we can't do anything. Like, if you want to go to the counselor and talk about it with her, you can. And I'm like, that's not going to do anything. Like, she needs to actually like get some sort of consequence for saying this. But yeah,
I think consequences need to happen from a young age and keep going. And teachers have to obviously there's good teachers that do things, but then there's those 50 others that don't, and it's enough to create problems, because once you get away with it once, you get away with it forever.
Exactly.
Or you think you do.
And I do have to commend some of the teachers, because in that situation I had one of like my softball two of my softball coaches, like they were there for me all the time. They were great. Also the school counselor, like she was there in the moment as well. So like there are like they understand as much as they can, you know. Yeah, someone commented saying there's always something that the school can do, but sometimes they choose not to. And I think that's a really big thing, like as well as like with the LGBT community at my school, like they will unnecessarily reprimand kids in like LGBT relationships. Like if they see two girls like exchange a kiss away, like they will get really mad for no reason. But then when it's a straight couple, they're like, oh, okay, we'll just leave it, which is really problematic. So like they don't know, having like a straight white principal, male principal as like a principal, he's not gonna, like if he feels uncomfortable in the situation, he's gonna say something, you know.
Yeah, and those double standards are really problematic. I feel like this is such a topic that a lot of people can relate to, also because it's not only about race, it's also like about you know, LGBTQ plus community. It's about sometimes being a girl and being like blatantly sexualized or offended in hallways, and people just like being like, oh, it's normal, like whatever.
It's like it was a huge thing with sexism with our dress code as well. Like we would have guys outside playing basketball shirtless, but then if a girl came in a tank top, it was a huge problem. And like I remember getting, like we changed our dress code like during my senior year, I think. So they said as long as your stomach isn't showing, you're fine. If you raise your arms and your stomach shows, then that's okay too, because when you're not raising your arms, like it's not showing. And I just remember being called to the side by the principal and being like, do you know why I called you over? And I'm like, no. He's like, oh, I can see your stomach. And I looked down and I was like, no, you can't. But it was just like the smallest things they will find, and it makes us uncomfortable too. So like it's kind of problematic, but yeah. What can you do?
Yeah, in Italy, it was a whole thing. Girls can't they have to wear pants, even in summer. In Italy, it starts in September, and it's super warm in September. Like, you don't want to go with long pants. And the girls had to go with long pants, and one girl went with a skirt. And the teacher reported her because he said that he couldn't not look at her, and so she had to change because he couldn't keep her eyes off of her if she wore something like that. And so it became a whole thing where a lot of girls just came with short skirts to protest this thing because like
Yeah.
the
That's
dress
problematic
code,
on your part, not the girl.
yeah, the dress code was made so that the male teacher wasn't distracted by the girl's like legs and knees. Like it was,
Yeah.
it's so
Yeah, very problematic.
Yeah, okay, so does anyone have any questions?
I was just looking through the comments just to see. Yeah, I don't think there's like a way to really, besides people like talking to others about like not saying the N-word during songs. I don't think there's like a way to like stop people, because a lot of people do have that idea, oh yeah, it's just a word, like you need to, like slavery happened so long ago, like you need to get over it. Like, no, first of all, you can't tell me that. Someone said, I know a lot of schools do something like an international day.
Yeah, we did.
But how do you think that relates? Yeah.
Okay, latest question is microaggressions. So do you want to explain what they are, or should I?
Yeah, so I feel like, well, just out of like my personal understanding, I feel like microaggressions are more like, as I said earlier, out of ignorance. Like it could be something like, for example, I was in a club once. I was going clubbing with my friends, and we were just having a good time, and like this girl that I didn't know and like her boyfriend came up behind me and just started like touching my hair and like grabbing it. Like I felt like I was in a petting zoo and I was the animal, right? And so I turned around, I was like, can you please not do that? Like that's a microaggression in a sense. Like, I don't know, it's like there's so many examples of something like that. Like what's the word? Like racial gaslighting as well. What? Sorry. Is there anything that you wanted to add as well?
No, I mean, it's just subtle things that happen that you wouldn't usually think they could be hurtful, but they are harmful to the individual because they are a minority. And microaggressions, again, are intersectional, so they can happen to women, to people of color, to people that are part of the community, the LGBTQ plus community, and they're just small comments or questions or touching or stuff like that that can really impact the person without the other person thinking they're doing anything.
Yeah, like I guess an example is I was in one of my classes, like there was a unit where we spoke about Nigeria and just like Africa in general. I don't know where I'm from in Africa. I wish I did, but obviously slavery, colonization, I don't know. So I'm African American, and every single time there was like a question about like something that happened in Africa or something that happened in Nigeria, I would be looked at, and like the teacher would turn to me and I'm like, dude, I don't know. I wish I did, but like I can't tell you. And that's like a microaggression. Like I've told you, like it was throughout the whole year. So I'd known him for an entire year, and like it was never understood. Yeah, but I guess that's an example as well.
Yeah, and like for other people being asked like, where are you really from, or just those small tiny things that they might seem innocent and the person might not even want to do harm are just like microaggressions that harm the individual.
Same with like, oh, you look so exotic, like that type of thing. I've gotten that quite a bit, and I think it's just because I'm mixed race, but getting you look so exotic or like asking, oh, where are you really from, that type of thing is very problematic. And like actually, like, I don't know, it's triggering.
Yeah. It's like, you're pretty for a black girl, you're pretty for a gay girl, you're pretty
yes, that I get that all the time.
Stuff like that. It's just it's tiny things, and we all I think, like I might have by accident done a microaggression and not know about it. So I think it's important to call people out if you see them doing something like this, just so we're aware of what our words and what our actions actually do and the effect that they have. One of the questions was, how can teachers help and support the BIPOC students and community?
I definitely think that teachers should go through some type of training. Like they always have these teacher in service days, like the day before we come back from a break or something, and there needs to be some type of diversity and inclusion module for them to learn. Because my entire school was Caucasian teachers, and we had one Black teacher, and he got fired. So they need to learn about it so that they can support, even though the like community is very small, they can support these BIPOC like students that go to the school. So that's something that needs to be taken up with like the actual international school system themselves. But yeah, I think that's like the best way to, I guess, start tackling the problem.
Yeah, diversity training and just training on how to deal with race issues when you have a student come to you and say that another student said the N-word, how to deal with that and how you should help. Another question is there anything specific you've experienced, especially because you're mixed?
Fetishization, is that how you say it? Fetishization? Yeah, being fetishized because I'm mixed race. Like there's this whole thing about like having mixed babies and that type of thing that is like really problematic. Like I don't know, and like colorism as well. Because I'm like lighter skinned, I can't speak on behalf of darker skinned people because that's not my place. But just definitely being fetishized because I am mixed race and because I look exotic or that type of thing. Like you're so pretty for a Black girl, or like I guess on like dating apps and stuff, or like if people comment or like send your post to you and like comment on it, like I've gotten like, oh, you're Italian, like so, you know, like exotic, that type of thing, and it's just like, shut up, like stop. But yeah, I guess that's the most that I've gotten in that aspect of it. Yeah.
Okay, does anyone else have any other questions?
I saw someone say, have people denied your identity to your face because you look to this or you look to that? Sometimes it happens with mixed people. That's a really good question. I think when meeting like new people, when I get the question asked to me of like, oh, where are you really from? Like that type of thing. When I say that I'm half white, I guess you won't immediately, like if someone immediately looks at me, they'll be like, okay, Black. Like they won't be like, oh, she's mixed with this, she's mixed with this, you know? So like I haven't really experienced this too much, which I'm very grateful for, but like people won't really, like I've had someone say like, oh, but you don't look it, so like you're not really. I'm like, well, yeah, but my dad, like my biological father is white. And so I won't be,
so
yeah, and I speak Italian, exactly. So sometimes I just won't be accepted as half white because I don't look it. I didn't take it as like it's a problem, obviously, but it didn't affect me as much because I know that people are just like being ignorant and like sometimes doing it on purpose just to get a rise out of me. But like I think that's the most that I've really experienced in terms of like denying my identity. I'm happy to say that I've never been told that I'm like too whitewashed for a Black person. Like I know a lot of people go through that, especially considering where I grew up as well. In terms of the mixed race part.
Okay, you're back. You froze for a second.
Sorry. Am I back?
It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if no one else has anything, how about in Italy? Have you experienced anything in Italy? Because Italy is
100%. Like my mom and I will always get stared at like all the time. Same with my brother. It's just like I love being Italian. I love being Italian so much, but like sometimes people are not discreet whatsoever. Like obviously we look different and they get so shocked when I speak Italian to them. Like they're like, "Oh, wait, what?" Like I don't know. So like for example, in the summer, I always go to my grandma's beach house in Italy, and like we go to the beach with our cousins and everything, and we have friends there as well because it's like a little community. And I've had before like because I get really tan in the summer. I had a kid at night when we would go out, like he'd be like, "Oh, where's Erica? Where's Erica? Like I can't see Erica." And it was really frustrating. Like that's like kids do this because they don't know. Like they don't, like he knew what he was doing. He very well knew what he was doing, but like they don't know how much of an effect that has on people. And during, like, I would get really insecure about like when I got tan, because obviously I was around a lot of white people and I felt like, oh my gosh, like I don't want to be too different. Like this was when I was younger and like more impressionable. Like I think I was in 8th grade when it happened. So obviously I was already insecure about how dark I was getting during the summer, which now I can't get enough tanning, but anyway. So I was already insecure about that, and then people making jokes about not being able to see me at night. It's not cool. And like, I don't know, people, and then I would get comments about like, I have a pretty slim figure, so they'd be like, say stereotypical things about Black women's bodies and be like, oh, why don't you look like this? Why don't you look like that? And I'm just like, okay, why don't you look like this? Like, you know what I mean? It's just, yeah.
It's, again, double standards that people have. Also,
Exactly.
I don't know what people say when look Italian. I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
I know so many Italians and we all look so different. Like,
exactly.
Like,
exactly.
no
Like when you
look
see me
Italian.
next to my dad, you know that that's my dad because we look so much alike. But like when we're walking around like in Rome or something, like you won't automatically be like, oh yeah, father daughter. They'll be like, where did he get her? Like where did he find her? But yeah, it's more stairs. Like I mostly experience microaggressions when I'm in Italy. Like there are exceptions, obviously, but yeah.
Yeah, and Italy's it's getting there. It's it's working. It's working. It's getting there slowly, but let's hope surely. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us today and for telling us about your experiences, but also for like, adding so much. Yeah, I mean, I'm very thankful that you could join.
Of course. Thank you for having me. This was great.
Well, thank you everyone for coming, and join us next week with a pre-recorded live video, and it's going to be about Asperger's and how we see it and how it actually is, and misconceptions about Asperger's. So thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.